I'd say, to be honest, like the modeling industry, specifically modeling versus the acting side, is changing a lot in the last like 5 to 10 years. And I just say that, like, personally, I'm a person who, like, I don't know, I don't get like discouraged by like, oh, if I see someone and I'm like, man, like I wish like I had her body or her face.
Fleming, and you are listening to Line for Line podcast.
Welcome back to Line for Line podcast. I'm your co-host today, Sarah Grabot. It is a beautiful afternoon, and I'm here with Gianna, and we're going to be talking about some of her accomplishments and interests. So, Gianna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Gianna Fleming. I go to Indian Trail High School. I play volleyball. I do modeling, acting, theater, singing. Yeah. Stuff like that.
The whole shebang.
Yes.
All right. So why don't you tell us let's start with which one have you been doing longer? Like the modeling or like the
modeling.
volleyball? The volleyball?
Yeah.
So how did you get started into that?
So for modeling, I was actually, modeling and acting, I'd say.
Yeah.
Kind of group those together. But when I was younger, I would like watch a movie and I'd be like, wow, you know, the actors up there, like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think it was, like, specifically, like, Star Wars, 'cause my brother is a big Star Wars fan.
Oh,
he
yeah,
was like,
so are mine,
and he's
They
like,
all are.
he's like, we're watching all of them, and I'm, like, 7, and I don't understand anything, and he has to, like, draw me diagrams of what's going on. And then I was, like, one day, I was probably 7 or 8, and I was like, that's so cool. So I go on my, like, iPad or something, and I search up, like, how do I be on, like, a movie or something like that. And I found, like open auditions for this agency called MTM, which is John Casablancas in Milwaukee. And I told my parents about it, and they're like, you know, sure, we can try it out, you know, why not? So we go up there, and it's in like Brookfield, I think, and they were like, okay, we'll have you read this like little thing of a commercial, we'll have you, you know, walk the runway for us, you know, no like instructions or like how to do it, you know, just you know, go out and do it. And I accidentally signed up for like the adults audition. And I'm like, you know, 7. And everyone else there is probably like 19 to like 22.
And how old are you at this point?
I was like 7.
Oh,
7 or 8 or something like that. And I was like, wow, these guys seem like really old. Wow. Yeah. But yeah, so out of that, they accepted me into it, which I think there were probably like 10 people there. They took like 2 of us, me and this guy who's probably like 18. And they were like, we're going to put you in a class. So like 10 classes, and it's like every other week. And then you like learn each week, like, oh, this week's focused on hygiene. And you learn like, you know, how to take care of your skin and like your face and just how to look like presentable, you know, whether it's like on camera or, you know, runway or stuff like that. Monologues, they do a photo shoot in that. And then at the end of the 10 weeks, you do like kind of like a presentation of everything you've learned so far. Right. And then you move from the John Casablanca side to the actual agency side, which is MTM. And then from there, they can book you for jobs. They can book you for like a bunch of stuff from there. Yeah. So then I finally moved over to the MTM side, and probably like it took me like 6 months because I did the classes really spaced out. But so yeah, so from that, they told me, they were like, hey, we want you to try out for this expo in Dallas, and it's like, you know, the best like 500 people in the country get to go. And, you know, you like might not make it, but like it's good experience to like, you know, try out or whatever. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do it. So I submit like pictures and stuff like that. I go to like the audition. I had to do the runway. I had to read a monologue. And then I was like not expecting anything from it, you know, because at that point I was probably 10 or 11, and I was like, you know, I'm not expecting
whatever.
Yeah, it's like the top 500 people in the nation. I'm like, I'm not gonna make that. Yeah. And then they were
Surprise.
like, they were like, we'll call you by like 8 o'clock if you didn't make it. And then I was sitting in a restaurant with my mom after like the audition. I was like, Mom, it's like 8:05, and she's like, okay, honey, calm down. Like, I'm like, you know, nothing's for sure. And I'm like, but it's past 8. And so I ended up making that expo, and I got to go to Dallas. And what an expo is where you like present your runway walk. You do your monologue. You do, if you have a song, you can do that for like 50 agencies worldwide. Like there were people from like New York and LA there, but also like Milan, Tokyo, I think, places in all over Europe.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's just cool in itself, you know?
Right.
Like just to see, whoa, this is like a real thing now. But so I did that. Since I was younger, I got waitlisted on a bunch of places, which is where they say like, hey, you know, you're tall for your age right now. So we're going to see like when you're like 18 or like 19, we're going to see like, you know, how tall you are there, what you look like, you know, so we're just going to like keep our eye on you.
Right.
And then from there, the next year, they were like, hey, there's a bigger expo.
No.
Try out for that one. And I'm like, okay, I probably won't make it. And odds are I made it.
Right.
And then, so that was kind of the same deal, but it was a lot bigger. And that one was in New York in 2019. Or no, that one was in LA in 2019. And then from there, I got contacted by 5 agencies. And one of them was MMG. And that is my current agency in New York.
Oh, that's so fun. So how often do you travel for modeling and acting and all
travel for modeling? Not a lot, to be honest, because I fully signed with my agency in August of 2019. I went out to New York. I did a photo shoot in New York with one of their photographers, which that was a cool experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I met them. I got to sit down in their office and like just talk through the whole process and how everything works. And by the time I fully got set up, it was like February 2020. And then March 2020 and COVID hit. And they were like, oh, yeah. So they switched from that. They switched a lot of like in person. Oh, everybody fly out to New York casting calls, you know, to like they'll send you an email and be like, hey, you know, they're looking for like a blonde girl who's like this tall. And, you know, you fit that description. So here you go. Like read these lines.
Right.
So that's kind of how most things are done now. So I don't have to travel a lot unless I have to go get like pictures redone, which I actually have to get pictures redone. So yeah, I have to go out there soon.
So you mentioned COVID. Did that like kind of put a halt to things, or was it able to like keep going with like online things or, you know, how did that work?
Yeah. I'd say COVID definitely affected the whole modeling and acting industry a bunch, obviously, because, you know, they used to do like, oh, like, yeah, you know, anybody who fits like this general description, you know, like come to New York and just like fly out, you know, and it'll be like 300 people. But of course with like COVID, you know, they don't want to do that.
You can't do that.
Yeah. And so it definitely does simplify the process a lot more, you know, and instead of getting lots of rejection, like you still get lots of rejection, but it's less because it's not like so much general stuff, if you know what I mean. It's more like, oh, instead of 300 people, it's, you know, 30.
Right.
So I'd say that, and that actually is a good thing, you know, I'd say. It obviously is fun to, like, travel and stuff like that, and be like, oh, I get to go to New York and stuff like that. But, yeah, I'd say it's not, like, a good thing or a bad thing. It's just like, oh, this is different.
Now, I know, I mean, personally from, like, seeing a lot of, like, social media, there's a lot of stereotypes with models and, like, a certain, like, body that they need to fit and a certain, like, just idea that they need to be categorized in. What would you say has been the biggest like mindful setback or just setback in general with that idea?
Yeah. I'd say, to be honest, like the modeling industry, specifically modeling versus the acting side, is changing a lot in the last like 5 to 10 years. And I just say that, like, personally, I'm a person who, like, I don't know, I don't get like discouraged by like, oh, if I see someone and I'm like, man, like I wish like I had her body or her face or like her hair or something like that. You know, I'm a pretty determined person. And I'd say like if I would see someone and say that, like I'd be like, oh, like next day I'll get my butt up and I'll go to the gym and work out.
That's how I am. Exactly. You know, I got to get it. I got to get what I want. You know, and I'm going to work for it.
Yeah. But I'd say that there definitely it's a lot more like open of an industry than it was even like, you know, 5-10 years ago.
Right.
Because instead of just like, oh, we want like a tall, skinny, white, blonde girl, you know, with this, and this, like now it's like, oh, we have, you know, petite models, we have, you know, plus size, we have, and even for guys, you know, there's obviously like, oh, we want the muscular, you know, 6'4", you know, tall guy or whatever. But now there's like so many more arrays into it. And personally, like I'm like tall, but I'm not that tall. Like I'm like 5'6", 5'7". So like I'm not that tall, you know, but I'm like taller than the average height. Which which I mean, like that is a thing that sets you back sometimes, because it's like, oh, they'll only consider you for like certain events in the expo. Like there's a swimwear event, and oh, if you can only compete if you're 5'8" or above.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're under that, they're like, well, we don't, you know, like we know you're not going to pick you anyway because you're too short. Which I'd say definitely does come with like, oh, like I wish I was just like that, you know, 1 or 2 inches taller. But being that there are a lot more, you know, pathways now, I'd say that I'm like confident in myself and who I am and my physical attributes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So now let me ask, where do you see yourself going forward in your future with like modeling and acting and all that?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I think about a lot and is always in the back of my mind, you know, because like modeling and acting and stuff like that. And when I say acting, I mean more like screen acting or like not rather than stage acting, you know what I mean? Because I do theater, but I don't think I would pursue that. Yeah. But I definitely like to do modeling professionally. Well, I mean, I do it professionally, but like, you know what I mean? Like as an adult, as a job. I mean, also speaking realistically, I know it's not like, you know, like that's something you have to like work for and you really have to say, like put everything else aside that you would want in your life and say like, this is the path that I'm going to go on, you know? And that's definitely a decision that I have to make for myself. Right. But I'd say that I would be willing to do that.
Yeah. You got time. Figure it out. Exactly. So, last topic of modeling. How do we collectively bring more women and girls together to empower one another? Yeah. Just overall.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a really good question. I'd say just not like, oh, how do I phrase this? Just like, I feel that girls as a whole are so used to like the stereotype and just being okay with like, oh, I'm friends with you and oh, we kind of don't like this girl, so we're just gonna put her down a little, you know what I mean? And not necessarily to her face or anything like that, but just like within each other, you know what I mean?
I know exactly.
And or like if I have like an issue with a girl, like instead of going up to her and saying, hey, like I have this problem with you, let's talk it out, you know, I feel like a lot of girls are more inclined, myself included at times, I'm not exempt from this.
Right. I mean,
but yeah,
right. Exactly. Here, right. Devon's like, what?
But instead of like, you know, going straight to like another girl's face and like talking to her through the issue, you know, you'd be like, oh, like, you know, so-and-so said this to me. And I think that definitely just being like more accountable, being there for each other, being supportive, girls support girls, I guess. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just being more willing and open-minded to like accept others.
Right.
And
help each other out. So now that we're kind of done with the modeling talk, let's move on to volleyball. All right. So when did you start playing volleyball?
Okay. So when I was in probably like elementary school, I would be in like the recplex and I would see like, you know, like whether it was Wisconsin juniors or whatever volleyball clubs they had in there, I'd see like, oh, like volleyball. And I always like thought it like seemed cool. Right. You know, and I never really like made like the effort to venture into it. Right. You know, and then when I was in 6th grade, I want to say, entering 6th grade, I started like talking to my dad about it. And I was like, hey dad, you know, I think I like want to try this, you know? And he's like, yeah, I think that'd be like fine. And so I started and I tried out for my 6th grade school volleyball team at Mahone Middle School. And I was like, oh, like I'm tall, I'll make it. Right. And I did not make it. I absolutely was terrible. And I was so surprised. And it was like the shock. It was like, it was shocking. Yeah. I was like, what? Yeah. So then out of that, like I said earlier, I'm a very determined person. So then that was in like March that I got cut from that. So the whole summer, I was in like some summer camp at the Recplex, and we'd have like this time where we'd just get to like, you know, mess around and do whatever we want with like all the like gym equipment. And I'd remember every day I would take a volleyball and I just hit it like against the wall and I just practice and get reps from that. Yep. And then the next year, you know, I like got a lot better from doing that, of course. And I went to a few Wisconsin juniors summer camps that year. And that really just like started me in like knowing the basics of volleyball, I'd say. And so I started, and I remember I went to tryouts, and I was like pretty good then at tryouts, you know, relative to like everyone else there. And I remember there were girls that like came up to me and they were like, wow, like you're doing like so good. And I was like, yeah, I got cut last year, but yeah, thanks. And they were like, what? Yeah, they were like, oh. But yeah, so I made the team that year. I was a starter that year. I played all around, which is where you don't like sub out, you know, or anything like that. And then that next year, I was like, oh, I'll, try out for 8th grade. And then, I'll try playing Wisconsin juniors this year for a club. And I definitely liked playing club, and then March 2020 came. And I was like, now our season got cut short. And now I don't get to play for middle school this year.
Right.
Yeah. So then the next year I did Wisconsin juniors again. I really liked that season. I played a longer season that year. And that was definitely tougher because, the first season I ever played, I broke my toe going into the season. So I missed probably 3 weeks. So it wasn't too bad. But, building that foundation with your teammates at the beginning is obviously important. And then the next year I sprained my ankle really bad through cheerleading, which I did last year. Yeah. And that really messed with my head. That was probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through, just because it was the worst injury I've ever had. I had a 3rd-degree ankle sprain.
I just had that a few months ago.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, the injury still affects me to this day. If I want to play volleyball, I have to, strap my ankle brace on. And it's this whole lace up, it's like a hockey boot.
Yeah. Exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. But I mean, that definitely messed with me. I was out for probably 2 months with that in a boot, half of the 2 months on crutches. And definitely
I probably should have followed those rules. I know I was on after 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
But yeah, I'd say that definitely made me a stronger person in the long run. But in that moment, that was really hard for me. And then to jump into the new team, that was hard too, because they were like, oh, aren't you the girl that sprained her ankle? And I was like, yeah. That's me. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you I know I do an individual sport that's very you focus on yourself. It's not very team-wise. Yeah. So how would you say, have you ever done any sports that are individual like that?
I mean, when I was younger, I tried a wide array of sports, as one does when they're 5. But but yeah, I played tennis for a while. Yeah. And I guess that versus a team sport. Right. What you mean? I definitely well, actually, I'll just use cheer. So cheer is obviously not an individual sport. I mean, parts of it are individual, physically cheering, but when you're stunting someone, that's not individual.
Not individual. Nope.
Yeah. But I'd say something that I like about volleyball is that you can stay in your lane. And no matter if the person who plays, the next position over, if they're having a terrible day and they're just being oh, I'm just going to not really go for it that much. I can still give it my all, and go for it. And even though, they are going to bring me down a little because, oh, you didn't get your pass up. Oh, you didn't get a good set. Oh, you didn't get a good hit or something like that. I can still be well, I'm going to get a good hit.
Right.
I'm going to get a good pass.
Best.
I don't care what you're doing. Yeah. You got this, but I'm going to do my best, know. But in cheer, if I'm being a back spot and I have my 2 bases here because I'm a back spot and then my flyer, and if one of my bases just decides, I don't really want to, work for the day, it's okay, we physically, we're screwed. We physically can't do it. Right. And that's something I really like about volleyball, just being that I'm a determined person and I'm stubborn at times, that, it's I'm not going to wait for you to have a good day. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm going to build you up and stuff like that, but I can't spend all my time being okay, right, are you gonna want to work? Right.
So it's so it's individual but working as a team together. So that really kind of works out.
Yeah, definitely.
So volleyball tournaments. What do you do before to prep yourself up? What do you eat? What do you what's the game day plan?
Yeah, the game day plan. Well, most tournaments start at this year I played for Epic, which Wisconsin juniors is out of the Recplex, and then most of the tournaments are within half an hour. I'd say a lot of them are at the Recplex. Yeah. And I live 10 minutes away from the Recplex, so that's always easy. Yep. But this year, being that I played for Epic, which is more out of Racine, Milwaukee area, most of the tournaments are an hour to an hour and a half away. Yeah. So if our first game's at 8, we have to be there by 7 because our coaches said be there by 7. Yep. We have to leave the house at 6. So I wake up at 5. Yep. And then I'll eat something really quick. I'll grab my caramel protein shake, and then I'll do my hair in the car, and then I'll sleep on the way there. I'll get there. The one thing about volleyball, though, is that they schedule it for, like, games per hour, right? So, like, the first game will be at, like, 8, and then the second game will start at 9. Well, if the 8 o'clock game goes into overtime, then that court for the day is, you know, like, off by, like, 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's how it is with Taekwondo. The rings are all jacked up.
Exactly.
Yep. All of a sudden, it's 10 o'clock at night, and Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I'd say the one annoying thing is that sometimes you'll be like, oh, okay, we have, you know, an hour break. And then the hour break turns into an hour and a half. And then it turns into 2 hours. And then you're like, oh, I could have left and got food, you know, instead of this, like, hot dog that's been sitting here for 3 days.
Right. You're right. Yeah. So playing volleyball and just doing everything that you're doing, it does take a lot of commitment.
Yes.
What would you say you've had to give up in order to, like some things you've had to put aside in order to pursue either, like, modeling or volleyball or whatever you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I do cheer. Yeah. And for Indian Trail Cheer, because I do Indian Trail Cheer, we had like the regular, like, you know, sideline football game, what you'd think when you say, oh, a high school cheerleader, you know?
Yeah, that's what you do.
And then we also have competition cheer, which is more like dance incorporated into cheer, if you know what I mean. And I had the option to do the competitive team, which I was already, like, on the competitive team, just, like, you know, already onto it. But I had to, like, tell my coach, hey, I can't do the competitive team, you know, because I have volleyball.
And that couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy because, you know, like, that's something you want to do. Like, you know, you make varsity, you know, you make varsity as a sophomore. You're like, oh, like, I want to do everything. I want to put my time into this. And then you're like,
but I can't.
Oh, I can't. Exactly.
It's the other.
I had to, because, like I was saying, I do theater too. I was in a KUSD show this year, and I had to turn it down just because of, you know, volleyball tournaments and stuff like that. I had to say, like, you know, I know that I can't give my all to your organization, so, like, I'm not going to waste your time and have, you know, both parties be mad at me. So I'm just going to say, you know what, I already committed to this one. I'm sorry, you know? Yeah. And it does like hurt doing that, especially when you know the people that you're, you know, turning down to.
It's home.
Exactly.
It's home.
And you're like, and you feel bad. And it is, like, you know, not necessarily like a mean thing, but you just, like, you know, feel like off about it. But at the end of the day, like, you only have your youth for so long. You know what I mean? And you really just have to, like, say, this is what I want to spend my time doing. You know, whether it's going to help me in 10 years or whether, you know, I'm not going to care about it in 10 years. Like, this is what makes me happy right now. You know, and you just have to do what makes you happy.
Yeah. So have you, like, considered, or have you already been, like, a coach or an assistant for volleyball? Or is it something that you plan to do in the future?
I have not been a coach or an assistant for volleyball. I've wanted to, because I wanted to actually go back to Mahone and help out with their program. Just given, like, stuff that I did that I'm currently doing, like, this year and last year, I think they, like, weren't allowing it because of COVID. I haven't been able to do that yet, but I would in the future like to do that or help, like, you know, assistant coach a team or something like that. But yeah, I'd definitely be into that.
Well, that's amazing. So before we close out, is there anything you would like to say, any people you would like to thank, or anything that you want to say?
I'd like to thank my brother, because my brother, his name's Kyle Fleming. He goes to Auburn University. He lives in Alabama. I only get to see him a few times per year, but he still remains, like, one of my best friends. You know, like, if I ever need something, like, I'll go talk to him, you know. And I just think that having, like, that sibling relationship is so important, and just, like, that I'm honored to actually have, like, a sibling relationship, you know. Like that, because I know there are, like, a lot of sibling, and whether it's sibling or, you know, just cousin or family relationships that aren't great. I'm just so grateful that I, you know, have, like, a really great one with my brother. And
So just one more thing that popped up to mind. What advice would you give to anybody, whether it's females, males, little boys, little girls, wanting to, you know, not only get into modeling or volleyball, but to do anything in life that they might be scared to?
Yeah, I'd say literally just go for it. Right. You know, because I know so many people, whether it's through, you know, volleyball or through theater or through, you know, modeling, acting, stuff like that, who they're like, you know, I'm just going to, like, play it on the safe side. Like, at the end of the day, like what I was talking about, like, you only have so much youth Right. And even if, you're not in your youth, like you only live once.
Right.
And not
Take
trying to be crazy, but
chance.
you only live once,
Yeah.
And if like there's definitely stuff in the past that I think about and I'm like, man, like I wish I would have done that. You know what I mean? And I think that's what I try to make my life about. And, what I just say to anybody, like just really just make it your own. Like if you want to do something, don't let other people decide what you have to do. Like just do what you want to do.
Exactly.
And if that's, modeling, if that's acting, if that's volleyball, if that's cheer, like whatever you want to do. Like don't let the world tell you that, oh, no, don't do that. Just go for it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I would like to thank you for coming on the show, and I would like to thank Devon Booker for having me as a guest co-host thingy. And closing out, this is Gianna Fleming, and we are on Line for Line podcast.
You calling or you listening, tune in every week. Line for line. Oh yeah, I'm going line for line.